Hi guys, this is going to be a dodgy, low budget video because we are running out of light. We are running out of time to get this video filmed. So I'm going to just talk about every book that I read in September because it's the 1st of October. I read 15 books and I'm still partway through a couple more. So let's go in order of best to worst. Let's do that because we can start talking positively while it's still bright, and then when the sun has really gone down, you will not be able to see me talking about all the books I didn't like. So the best book that I read this month was Rouge by Mona Awad. I just finished this last night and it's so much fun. I love Mona Awad. She's just an incredible writer. At parts, I thought that this would be a 5-star and a new favourite. I don't think it is. I think it's a 4.5, but I still absolutely loved it. I ate it up, and I'm just going to read everything that she writes from now on because I just think that she is a genius. This is a gothic fairy tale like retelling story. It's very inspired by Snow White and also Beauty and the Beast, and it's also a kind of critique on the beauty and skincare industry, which is really interesting, and I loved it. So the book starts with our main character, and she is at the funeral for her mother, and then there's this beautiful lady in red who kind of is at the funeral, and she kind of seems to know a lot about her mother, and so then it goes from there. But I don't want to tell you anything else because this is a wild ride, as with all of her books, and it's really fun. So I'd really recommend it, and I'd recommend going in kind of blind as well. But I just love the whole vibes of the book, like the cover as well, like it's really well suited to the story, and I just love it. It's so good. So this is the best book that I read in September. Next up, we have 2 books that are kind of 4.25 stars. I do mine on Storygraph, so I am allowed to use quarter stars ratings. So the next one I'd probably put here is He Who Drowned the World, which I'm so surprised at because I was putting off reading this book for ages, and if you've seen any of my vlogs while I was reading this, I've kind of explained a bit there, but this is the sequel. So it's the last book in the duology, starting with She Who Became the Sun, so the Radiant Emperor duology. And I was putting this off because I just for some reason did not like She Who Became the Sun that much, even though it started out as one of the best openings I think that I've ever read in a fantasy story. I was immediately engaged and I loved the whole opening of the story, and then by the end of the book I was sick and tired of it and I just really didn't like it. But for me, the second book, just absolutely everything that I didn't like about the first one wasn't in the second one, and also the amazing writing and a lot of the things I loved about the first one was still there. So I just thought it was incredible. It's a military inspired fantasy story, and it's very focused on gender and gender expression. My problem with the books was both the military aspects and also the fantasy aspects, at least in the first book. In the second book I didn't have this problem. In the first book I really didn't like how the military kind of actual physical battles played out as well. They weren't well written in my mind. I couldn't really picture them and I didn't really understand what was going on a lot of the time. And also the fantasy aspect, the magic system, it wasn't really explained very well. It felt like it was just added in for no real reason, just to be able to market this book as a fantasy, and I thought it really just wasn't very well developed at all. And I didn't really like any of the magic system. Like, I don't mind soft magic where it's not very well explained, but this was like so not explained that it just became confusing and it felt like there was no real point to it even being there. But in the second book, I thought that that was really resolved. First of all, there were less actual military battles, and also you got, I think, just the right amount of time in each POV character. So the character arcs were just absolutely beautiful. Like the way that they came to a conclusion in the end, I thought everyone was exactly where they needed to be as a character. I just thought the whole thing was handled really masterfully, and I loved the ending, which is so rare for me, especially in a fantasy series. I actually love the ending, but it's exactly what felt right, and it felt like there were breadcrumbs right from the beginning of the story that this was the way it was always going to go. It felt like a really natural conclusion. So I ended up really loving this one, and I give it 4.5 stars, or 4.25 stars I think I said. And the other one that was 4.25 stars was Starling House by Alix E. Harrow, and I've not read that much of Alix E. Harrow's work, but now I need to. I read her short story The 7 Deaths of the Saint, or 6 Deaths of the Saint, and I really liked that as well. So this is Starling House, so this is her new book that's just coming out, or maybe it's out by now, or I think it's coming out this month, and I really love this one. It's a kind of haunted house gothic romance mystery story. But basically we follow Opal, who is an orphan, and she's just trying to make ends meet and bring up her younger brother and also help him escape this town that they live in, which is just crumbling into ruin basically. And she's long been obsessed with this very mysterious mansion that's on the outskirts of town. And when a job opportunity comes up to go and clean the house to earn some extra money, she jumps at the chance. Then she meets the last living heir in the house, who's a grumpy person, and you can kind of see where it's going from there. But I just loved this story. I loved the vibes of it. I loved the romance. And I loved the haunted house. That was my favourite thing. Just the setting of it was really fun, and the house has its own personality, and it's really, really good. I didn't 100% love the ending, which is why I'm giving it 4.25. I thought that it was perhaps wrapped up a little bit too quickly and too neatly, but overall it was just really good vibes, and it got me in that gothic September kind of spooky mood. Next up, another book that I did a reading vlog for, so I won't go into it too much, but I read Vampires of El Norte and I rated this 4 stars. I really love this one as well. I listened to this on audiobook and it was just perfect vibe. Basically it's set in Mexico, and there's these 2 characters who are in love when they're young children, and they think they're going to grow up and get married together, and then one night they're out and they get attacked by a vampire, and the male main character thinks that the female main character has died, and then he basically runs away from town and he doesn't turn back, and she didn't die. But then 9 years later, when Texas is invading Mexico, he comes back to the town he's from, sees that she hasn't died, and they kind of have to contend with this fact that he abandoned her, and this whole very complex and emotional thing, while there's also vampires going on, while there's also a war going on. And I just loved it. I loved the angsty vibes. I really liked the interactions between the 2 main characters. I thought that the romance was really believable. I talk about this more in my vlogs, but I loved the dynamic between them, and I liked that their romantic tension wasn't easily resolved by just one person saying one thing, or just like, you know, when you're just waiting for someone to say one thing and then everything's going to be resolved and everything will be fine. I was genuinely thinking, oh my god, how are they really going to get through this? Like, how are they going to get back together? And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I also really enjoyed how the vampires were depicted in this. They start off really scary, and then by the end you're kind of almost feeling sorry for the vampires, but it's really interesting. I really, really recommend it. And then the next book, this was a shocker to me, and I was surprised how much I enjoyed it, but this is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which I rated 3.75, maybe almost 4 stars. But basically this is a young adult murder mystery, and it's about a girl who's investigating a murder that happened in her town 5 years ago. And the main thing I think that just pushed this up for me is listen to an audiobook, and the cast was really good. I thought that the audiobook was done really well, but also I just really loved the main character. I loved Pippa. She's just so weird, and I just really liked her character. She didn't make me cringe in any way, but she just felt like a very believable, like, teen character. And I just really enjoyed it. I don't think I'll carry on with this series though. I looked up some reviews about the next few books, and I'm just not sure that it goes in a direction that I really want to explore. But I had such a fun time with this first book, and I rated it like 3.75 or almost 4 stars. And 2 more books with similar ratings for this is, firstly, I read Sourcery by Pratchett. I also rated that around that mark of almost 4 stars. This is just another fun one. This focuses on the wizards and the unseen university. I'm having so much fun doing a read of Discworld. I've never read it before, so this is like my 4th or 5th Discworld book. And I'm really liking it, and I especially liked this one because you really got some character development from Rincewind. I always say his name wrong, I need to check it. And I think that was kind of sorely needed. I really liked how it ended and kind of his character progression throughout the book, so that was really fun. And the second one that got a similar rating for me is Season of Migrations to the North. So this is a book from Sudan, and I was so surprised by how much I really enjoyed this one. It's a short book and it's super, super engaging, and it's basically about this man who lives in a small village in Sudan, but he's been away for a few years studying in Europe. He comes back to the village he grew up in, and there is a man living there where like no strangers have ever lived there before, and this man has a very mysterious background, and it turns out he's also been away studying in Europe and come back, and he's had some absolutely crazy things happen to him in his life. And I really loved it. I loved how the information was revealed quite slowly, and it kept the mystery aspect up of the story, and it has a great commentary on colonialism, and I just thought this one was so interesting, so I rated it for 4-ish stars. And the next one, around the same basic rating, I read Masters of Death, which I was slightly concerned about, and I'm not sure why I picked it up, because last month I read One for My Enemy by Olivie Blake and I didn't love it. But by contrast, I've loved her previous one, which was Atlas 6, and I've read the second one in that as well, The Atlas Paradox, and I usually really liked her writing, but I didn't love One for My Enemy. I was worried also at the beginning of this book, but okay, it's time to turn the lights on. Sorry for the drastic lighting change, but we needed some light in this room because we're just going to be sitting in the dark otherwise. Okay, so talking about Masters of Death, I was a bit worried about 40% through this book. Basically, the plot is that you're following this real estate agent who's a vampire, and she is trying to sell a house, but the house has got a ghost in, so she's trying to get rid of the ghost. But when you actually start reading the book, you realize there's a lot more characters than that, and a lot of the book is kind of setting up this playing board, is how I can describe it. It's kind of like setting up this game, and you have a lot of different characters, a lot of different players. So I think for the whole first like 40% of this book, it was quite slow and I was just getting to know what the hell was going on. But once the actual plot kind of kicked in and this kind of game started in earnest, I then really enjoyed it, and I really liked the ending. And I always like Olivie Blake's writing. I personally think she has really funny writing and it's very witty. I always like her dialogue, and I like her unique characters and the way that I can never really guess the way the stories are going. And that had all of this in it, so I rated it around 3.75, 4 stars as well. Okay, so next up in the 3.5 star range, I read Bookshops and Bonedust. I just read this book yesterday and it was really, really cute. It's a prequel to Legends and Lattes, and it's set in a bookshop. And so you're following Viv, who's the main character of Legends and Lattes, at an earlier stage in her life. I thought it was really sweet. I think I actually slightly preferred it to Legends and Lattes, but I don't love Legends and Lattes that much. Like, I like it because it's cute and cozy, but like it's not a favourite of mine. I do prefer, I think, stories that are a little bit more complex, just something you can have sink your teeth into. But this one was really cute. It's just exactly what I expected it to be, and it's 3.5 stars for me. Next book that's also 3.5 stars was Patricia Wants to Cuddle. So this was billed to me as a queer, campy horror story with comedy as well, but I think I just wanted to love it more than I actually did love it. This is following the last 4 contestants of a Bachelor-like reality TV show called The Catch, and they are filming the last episodes on this very remote island, and it becomes quite clear that something's not quite right and something is kind of stalking the island. And I think for me this lent more on the horror side than the comedy side, or maybe it's the fact that I don't think I got on that well with the comedy, but I hoped it was a bit funnier and a bit campier. I don't know, like I think that it was fine. It was kind of funny, but I think that actually a lot of it was quite sad and focused on the kind of horror and the gore a bit, which wasn't my favourite. And I just think that some of the characters, like I just wish they kind of had better endings as well. So yeah, it was a good fun time, but nothing that I would like rave about. Okay, and the next book is a book that I read for my Reading Around the World book club, so join us on Fable if you want to read around the world with me. But this is the pick for September, which was Indonesia, and it's happy stories mostly, and it's a collection of short stories. They kind of focus on sexuality and gender and growing up queer in Indonesia, and also a lot on the Dutch colonization and what's that kind of done to Indonesia, the kind of the rippled effects of that as well. They were really interesting. They were very strange stories, a lot of them. Some of them were much more engaging than others. I think that especially just the really, really short stories that are only a page long, I just did not get that much out of. I think that there was too much context that I was missing, and I think maybe some of it was missing also in translation. Some of them, on the other hand, I thought were really fun and really weird and like really got me thinking. So it's just always such a mixed bag with short stories. I think that the only short story collection that I've loved is Cursed Bunny. All the others I think are very middle of the range or in the lower end for me, and this is no different. It's kind of a 3.5 stars from me. And also everyone on the book club felt really similarly as well. Actually, we all had relatively similar ratings, and also most of us had similar views on the different stories. My personal 2 favourite stories were A Young Poet's Guide to Surviving a Broken Heart, which I felt was just one of the only kind of more light-hearted stories in there, even though it's about having a broken heart. And also Deep Brown Verging on Black, which was a really creepy story that really reminded me of You. Actually, someone in the book club said that, and then it reminded me of You, the TV show. So thank you if you were the one who said that in the book club. But yeah, so this was a mixed bag, but 3.5 overall, so I'm glad that I read it. Okay, the next book that I want to talk about is such a weird one. I have no idea how to even describe what this book is about, but I read the Dirty Havanna trilogy, and I actually read this for my Reading Around the World challenge. So this is set in Cuba, and I don't know much about Cuba. And it is set in Cuba in the 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the whole country is just in a huge recession. There's lots of people that are starving. The whole kind of system is crumbling, and people are leaving on rafts every day to try and get to America. And it's just such a strange book. I have never read anything like it. It's also very disgusting. It's, if you want to read a book where literally every single chapter mentions shit and something absolutely disgusting, then read this book. It's just unflinching in what it's talking about. You're basically following someone called Pedro Juan, who it's kind of expected that it's a slightly autobiographical book. And I'm so sorry if you can also hear screaming children. There's like a kid's birthday party going on outside. Can you hear these kids that are screaming? That's kind of actually how I felt while reading this book, because a lot of it did make me literally want to cover my eyes. You're following him as he's going around and trying to get money, and also he's like escaping through just having sex with loads of different women and drinking rum and just going around being an absolute degenerate. And he used to be kind of quite a high-flying journalist, and that's what I mean by slightly being autobiographical. And he's kind of observing life around him and his own decline into this kind of way of living being like absolutely about pure survival. But he is such a strange he's such a strange mind to be in. It's so contradictory from moment to moment, and it really delves into the depths of someone's mind when they are having to confront so many harsh realities about life and about themselves. And it was really interesting, but it was also a really difficult read. It was kind of painful to get through a lot of the time because a lot of it is disgusting. There's a lot of shit, there's a lot of sex that's described in not the best way, there's a lot of prostitution and poverty, and a lot of brutal gore is described. So this is not for the faint of heart. It was an interesting read. I didn't rate it that highly because just on pure enjoyment level I can't, but I'm glad that I read it. So this was like a 2.5 stars from me. And I was singing happy birthday to the child. I still have 3 books to go through and we are rapidly losing light. So the last 3 books, I'm actually having trouble kind of placing them in terms of my ranking from best to worst. But because I technically DNF'd one, but I wouldn't actually say it was any worse than the other 2. So maybe I'll save that one for last. The next one, which one did I prefer out of these 2? I don't know, kind of similar actually. So these are both like 1.5, 2 stars to me. Next up, I'll talk about Medusa by Jessie Burton. I unfortunately did not really enjoy this one, and now I just think perhaps Jessie Burton's writing is not for me. This is a Medusa retelling. There's not actually much else I can tell you about it because it didn't do anything particularly interesting or different or exciting or well. I didn't really enjoy the writing. I didn't like the characters, and I just think that it just didn't really need to exist. So this is like a 1.5 stars for me. The only good thing about it is the cover. I love this gold and green cover, but yeah, unfortunately not for me. And then on a similar rating but a very different book, I read The It Girl by Ruth Ware, and this is my first Ruth Ware book actually. And this actually was okay. I think I'd probably rate this higher actually than Medusa now thinking about it. This was okay. This was a thriller mystery, murder mystery story about a murder that happened on a campus. I think it's Cambridge University, and her best friend makes a testimony about what she saw and who she thinks did it, and then it's like 10 years later or something, and the man has died in prison, and then a journalist is investigating what actually happened, and he thinks that perhaps her testimony put the wrong man in prison. And so you're exploring that, you're kind of jumping back timelines. It's quite a dark academia vibe, which I quite enjoyed actually, kind of set on campus. Essentially, I guessed one of the more major plot twists around 20 pages in, and this book is well over 400 pages, so I think that it's just far too long for what it was. There was another slight twist at the end that I didn't guess, but I also think that it was a bit of a cheap twist in the fact that I don't think the breadcrumbs were there, of, you know, what, like, you couldn't have really guessed it. Yeah, overall it was actually fine. It was nothing special, but just far too long for me. I think it would have been really improved if you took out, honestly, about 200 pages of it. And then the last book I want to talk about is a book that I DNF'd, which I so rarely do, but I'm trying to get better at it. This was something I was listening to on audiobook, and I think it was just putting me in a bit of an like audiobook slump, because I didn't want to start a new audiobook until I finished this one, but I just didn't want to read this one. Like, I just was never picking it up and never listening to it, and it was The Shadow King. So this one was actually sounded so interesting. It's all about Ethiopia, and it's about Mussolini's invasion of Ethiopia, and also specifically about the women fighters who were trying to push back this invasion. But something about the way it was written, and I still don't even really know why, it's harder to analyse, in my opinion, an audiobook, but I just really didn't like it. I didn't feel engaged with the characters, and I was just so weirdly bored by it, even though all of the historical aspects were so interesting. I also think that it was slightly overwritten. I didn't really enjoy a lot of like the prose of the book, but I don't know, maybe I'll go back and try this again, not on an audiobook. Maybe it was just the medium that I just didn't really enjoy. But yeah, I just had to DNF it, and I'm kind of glad I did, because then I read 3 other audiobooks this month, which I ended up really enjoying all of them. So I think in the end it was a good decision to DNF it, and I still managed to read 15 books this month, so that was my DNF. And then just before I finish this video, I wanted to quickly mention the poetry book that I'm currently reading. This is a collection of Rilke's poems. I am about 50% through, and I'm just loving reading a few of these every day. I enjoy the nature imagery. He does lots of imagery around animals and fruit and seasons and that kind of thing. In general, I'm having a lot of fun with this, and it's really, really cute, and I just also love this edition. You can't see it because it's so dark in here, but yeah, it's like a really cute little edition. The Everyman's Pocket book something. So those are the 15 books that I managed to read in the month of September, and overall it was a good month, but not a great month. I didn't find any new favourites. There weren't any 5 stars in there. But I did have a good time. But although actually out of all the books, like, I owned some of the ones that were the least good, and I don't own some of the ones that were the best, apart from Rouge. Rouge was obviously my #1 book. It's very dark and spooky in here. I'm just gonna say it's for the vibes and it's intentional. I have no idea if this video is just gonna look okay when I review it, but thank you so much for watching. If you did watch all the way through, if you did, please subscribe to see more book videos, and I also do vlogs. And the next video I do is probably going to be my October TBR, because I like to do one of those every single month too. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!